Okay, let's start. Good afternoon or good morning. Welcome to our LME-GC panel. I'm Valérie Laplante. I'm a member of the LME Canada board, and I will be your host today. This is a very exciting edition of our annual GC panel, as we are pleased to host it 100% virtually this year. Among the positive aspects of virtual event, we have the opportunity today to listen to 3 GC from various provinces across the country. I hope you will find this event very interesting, as we will address ESG factors, a topic that has become more central in General Counsel's strategic agenda in recent years. Before we start, I would like to invite all participants to use the Q&A tool to ask any question. If time allows at the end of the session, we will do our best to answer your question. Now, I would like to take a moment to thank our 3 panelists, Andrea, Nick, and Greg, as well as our sponsor, Key Media. Speaking of Key Media, to moderate the conversation today, we have the pleasure to welcome Tim Wilbur, current editor-in-chief of Key Media's print and digital law publication, including L'Expert, Canadian lawyer, in-house, and Law Times. A licensed lawyer, Tim is a graduate of McMaster University with a degree in philosophy and human rights and Juris Doctor law degree from the University of Toronto. He has over 16 years of publishing experience, starting as the focus editor on the Lawyer's Weekly publication at LexisNexis and managing legal editorial content from Thomson Reuters. His reporting covers all areas of law in Canada, and he also oversees content for Key Media's legal events, including the Canadian Law Awards and L'Expert Rising Stars. He has appeared on panel discussion and has chaired and emceed leading events for the legal community in Canada. Without further delay, I'll leave it to Tim to introduce our panelists. Enjoy the session.
Thank you, Valérie. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for me, maybe morning for you elsewhere, to talk about General Counsel's perspective on ESG factors. For today's panel discussion, we're following Chatham House rules, so we won't be writing a story or quoting anyone, just to keep the openness and open discussion and candor. So please comply with that if you're participating today. So I'm really happy to introduce the 3 GCs from, as Valérie said, from across the country. First off, I'd like to introduce Andrea Wood from TELUS. As Chief Legal and Governance Officer at TELUS, Andrea oversees the team that provides legal advice on all facets of TELUS's business and operations worldwide. She's a member of the TELUS Executive Leadership Team and serves as Corporate Secretary of the TELUS Board of Directors. Through her leadership, she enables advancement of TELUS's social purpose to connect all Canadians for good, which is very key for today's discussion. She's a fervent advocate for transparent financial and non-financial disclosure, enabling TELUS's global leadership in social capitalism. She also serves as TELUS's global executive sponsor for Connections, a grassroots initiative that supports networking and career growth for women across the organization. And selfishly, I'd like to point out that we're very happy to have Andrea as one of the members of our Canadian Lawyer Editorial Board, which we just launched this year. Andrea is, welcome Andrea, and Andrea is based in Toronto, but she also works in the Vancouver office of TELUS. And second is Nick Desmarais from the Jimmy Pattison Group. And Nick's going to tell us a bit more about what the Jim Pattison Group does, but he's the Managing Director of Legal Services there, and he's been in that role for 28 years. And he says, with the same title and no promotions, those are his words. He's in charge of all things legal and insurance. And our third panel member is, Nick is based in the Vancouver office of Jim Pattison Group. And our third panelist is Greg Orlesky, who's from Pharma Science. Gregory has more than 20 years of Canadian and international pharmaceutical and commercial law experience. After 7 years in private practice, Gregory joined the pharmaceutical industry, where he continued his career in legal and business management positions with companies such as Merck, Valeant, Abbott Laboratories, and now Pharma Science, a private family-owned company. Gregory's represented companies' interests in regulatory and intellectual property disputes, joint ventures, M&A, divestitures, and has advised on a vast spectrum of compliance, security matters, corporate and business strategies. So before we get into the questions, I just wanted to point out what's great about our panel members is they're from very different kinds of companies. We have privately owned family companies, I mentioned. We have a conglomerate, which has many different business arms, both private and as well as a large public company, which is TELUS. So we know the answers are going to be very different from the panelists, which is great to give us the broad array of how ESG fits into their work. So the first question I have, and I'll ask each of the panelists, is how is ESG defined within your organization and legal operations? So first, I'll pass the question off to Greg Orleski.
So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I hope everyone can hear me well. So pharma science, maybe a little bit about pharma science, just to give you context on some of my responses to Tim's questions. So pharma science is a 40-year-old privately owned family-run business. And I say family, a large family business. We head office in Montreal, Quebec. We are among the top 10 largest pharmaceutical companies in Canada across all sectors, including the multinationals. We also are the second largest privately owned company, the third largest generic division, almost second across Canada. And we're the largest employer in the pharma sector in the province of Quebec. We develop our own products, which means we have laboratories, people, scientists, like you see on the ads. We have manufacturing facilities in the province of Quebec. We distribute and sell our products directly and indirectly in about 70 countries, including obviously our home base, which is Canada. So to your question, Tim, how does pharma science define ESG? I would say we're no different than the larger publicly traded companies, whether it be Pfizer, Sanofi, Abbott, Glaxo, et cetera, Novartis, several of the same components, if you will. Access, obviously in our industry, access to affordable medicines. This is for our healthcare professionals and patients especially. Business ethics, integrity, and compliance, not just in Canada, but around the globe. We have offices internationally, Asia, Central Eastern Europe. Innovation, human capital management or people management, and that's from a diversity perspective, from a training and career development perspective, and most importantly, recently, talent recruitment, which I'm anxious to hear from my colleagues if they're facing similar challenges, recruitment, retention, and succession. And succession in the sense that because of COVID, March 20th opened up a whole new world of employee mobility. You are no longer restricted to your hometown where your office is. You can work anywhere. We can hire anywhere. So that's creating also unique challenges for our company. Innovation, product quality, supply chain management, risk and crisis management, and then community social responsibility. So that's how we would define that at Pharma Science.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, Nick, can you tell us how your ESG is defined within your organization and legal operations?
Yeah, so just a little bit of context about our company, which will help you to understand why we don't have a one true definition. Sort of the top level we might, but it really goes down to the different operating companies. So my 93-year-old boss started the business 60 years ago with one car lot. And over the last 60 years, we've grown, and now we have 28 retail car dealerships, about 33,000 cars under lease, 40 radio stations. We've got fishing companies in Canada and the United States. We've got over 300 grocery stores in Western Canada. We have a sign manufacturing business in Canada and the United States, outdoor advertising, various branded food products, periodical and beer distribution business. We've got packaging businesses in Canada and the United States. We own Ripley's, believe it or not, which owns the Toronto Aquarium and about 100 different locations around the world, the Guinness World Book of Records, and a coal terminal, which we have a public interest in. So the ESG is really, it's not one size fits all. We have union and non-union locations. And with those different businesses, there's different histories and sensitivities. And it's really, we run an autonomous business. So all the different companies combined have their own senior management teams. They have their own president, CFO, and the rest. And so it's up to them, following their specific industries, to determine how their ESG businesses are going to run. And we get input on that. But the success and the secret sauce of this company has always been to let the different divisions run their own show.
Great, thank you. And Andrea, can you tell us about TELUS and how ESG is defined there and in with your legal operations?
Sure, I'd be pleased to do it. And I apologize if you see me freezing or coming on and off. I'm having a little bit of connectivity issue. So bear with me, and if I have to drop, I'll jump back in. So I, of course, am with TELUS, as you heard from Tim's introduction. I think most people on this call will think of TELUS as a national telecom carrier, and we are that. We're very proud to be that. I don't have TELUS internet. I'm based in Toronto, and so my internet is provided by somebody else, but I wish I did have it today. So we're, it's important to note, I think, as you hear the presentations of the panelists today, that we're a publicly traded company. So that brings with it different obligations and expectations with respect to ESG. We have 16 billion in annual revenue. And I guess the thing that may surprise people about us a little bit is that we have diversified in ways that are quite different than the ways our competitors have diversified. So for example, we are Canada's leading digital health technology provider. And within our health business, we're also in the clinics business, and we're in the virtual care business. In addition, we recently launched TELUS Ag. Last year, we acquired a number of companies that we relaunched and have stitched together to form TELUS Ag. TELUS Agriculture will provide digital innovation solutions across the ag value chain. So it will focus on, and it focuses on food security, food productivity, and food traceability, importantly. And then finally, we are the controlling shareholder of a company called TELUS International, which is a public company in its own right. And it provides digital customer experience solutions in a very contemporary way. It uses AI, for example, to enable a lot of the customer solutions that it provides, and it operates out of bases all over the world effectively. So one thing that unites us all, very disparate operations, as you've heard. We operate in many geographies, we operate in many businesses, but what unites us all is a shared commitment to ESG. We are all unified by our commitment and our social purpose, which is to connect all citizens for good. We also rally behind something that we call social capitalism and our belief in social capitalism. And by that, we mean that we believe that we can do well in business by doing well by the communities that we serve and support. So it's a slightly different approach, I know. We have gained a lot of recognition for the approach, and I think we are. I can say it because I'm new to the game, or I've been at TELUS for 8 years, and this approach preceded my arrival. But I think people really appreciate it. We are on the Wall Street Journal's ranking of the world's 100 most sustainably managed companies. We ranked 15th for social capitalism on that index. We're listed on the Dow Jones Sustainability World Index for the 5th year in a row, and on their North American Index. We've been there for 20 years. We are recognized by Corporate Knights as being among the 50 best corporate citizens in Canada. That's our 14th time getting that award. And we are on their list of the 100 most sustainably managed companies in the world. So we get a lot of recognition for our ESG programs and our commitment to ESG. Those are just a few. So why do we do it? not just for the recognition. I said that we believe it's good business to do it, and that is why we do it. You know, a couple of the other speakers, the other speakers have alluded to this. It contributes to great employee engagement. We have world-leading engagement scores, and we believe that is in part because our employees are able to rally behind our sincere and deep commitment to what we call social capitalism. Our employees themselves are incredibly generous and are motivated by that. For example, since 2000, we've given 1.6 million days of service to our communities through our employee base. And so we enable that for them, and they like it. We believe our customers expect it from us. We have made a customer's first promise to ourselves and our customers, and we believe that it helps to attract customers. We think ESG done right can contribute to the bottom line through careful cost controls, such as through energy, reduced energy consumption, just by way of example. We think it can contribute to great strategic planning. It provides a great framework, great decision-making framework, and so we use it to identify opportunities and mitigate risks in all of our various businesses. We all need to commit to addressing climate change, of course, as part of managing risk, so that's there. And then I guess the final thing is the E&G investment community is huge and growing. And I think that you know, public and private companies that want to attract that investment are going to need to be able to demonstrate a good track record in ESG. So that's our commitment to ESG in a nutshell.
Great, thank you. So my next question, I just want to ask about how, more specifically, how ESG factors are impacting your business and how you anticipate this will sort of change or evolve into the future. So maybe I'll start with Nick and talk. I know there's various different lines of businesses, so to maybe talk about the differences between them, or if there is a broad sort of approach, or anticipate how this will be affecting your business into the next few years.
Well, I think the different businesses and the different industries are impacted more or less depending on which industry they're in, because there's more or less pressure from either customers or third-party sources. So we have a number of companies where ESG is, you know, front and center, and we have to be responsive, and we're not as sophisticated in doing all the things that that Layla's doing, but we're definitely moving up the chain here. We're progressing. But, you know, we look at our sign manufacturing company and our fishing businesses and a number of other businesses where it's very important to our customers, and in working with our suppliers similarly. So it's all up and down the chain. So it's not just about us, but it's about who we buy from and who we sell to. And then there's other companies where ESG is not really within our total control, because we don't control the environmental side. So the car business, the car retail business, we don't control the make and model of what the cars are doing, but our manufacturers are doing that. So it's really very fact specific, but it's in everybody's wheelhouse, and it's like the tide coming in, and it's a matter of, you know, dealing with this is the new normal, just like COVID's shown us what the new normal has to be, you know, in the work experience. So it's the different elements of ESG have different relative importance depending on the industry that we're in, but it's touching all our companies.
Thank you. And I know, Gregory, for you, it's a very specific industry you're in, and it's also an industry that there's a lot of public attention on now, more than there maybe ever has been in your career. I'm not sure, but how have the ESG factors sort of impacted your business? You spoke a bit about some of the immediate priorities, but how do you anticipate this will sort of affect how your business operates in the next few years?
So good question, Tim. Thank you. So I'm going to maybe bifurcate my answer and talk to you about pre-COVID. and maybe defer, if you don't mind, to the post-COVID answer. So pre-COVID, I think because of the nature, and it's not just me, I think if you talk to anyone who was working in our industry, ESG is like fundamental. It's almost a foundation of our industry because of who we serve and what we do for the community, especially ultimately the patients and helping them with their health. So what I would say is pre-COVID, the trend if you were asking me, before March 13th, 2020, when everyone, disbanded and went home and everything, the whole world changed dramatically, I would have told you that there was an increasing trend, and I'm going to say intercompany ESG exchanges. So I think, lack of a better word, maybe globalization, where different companies are seeking like ESG partners. So you're seeing continually a trend where even pharma science, as much as we're quite proud of our programs and our standards, we're even being challenged by other companies that if we wanted to be a preferred vendor, partner, supplier, that we had to meet certain standards. And I was seeing a continued trend in that direction, which was great, but it wasn't anything like what we're experiencing in our industry post-COVID. So maybe to stop there, and I'll let you, I think you may have a question later on for the pandemic, and I'll save my pandemic comments for later.
Great. Andrea, can you talk a bit about how ESG factors have impacted on your business in particular, and what you see, how you see this playing out in the near future?
Sure. So the short answer to your question is very substantial. I've talked to you a little bit about our program and why we believe in it and how we approach it. If you go down a couple of layers, we're obviously in the technology business, and so we remain committed to leverage our technology, which we think is world leading, to address the world's most pressing issues. And so we approach all opportunities with that lens, and recognizing that is our sweet spot. So in our core business, that informs our desire to put our customers first, and to ensure that we're able to provide the best possible network nationally, including in rural areas. We see that as being important to bridge economic and digital divides, to help people to connect to educational and professional opportunities that they will need for their own prosperity. So, we see our core telecom business as being an enabler of important ESG outcomes. In addition, we've looked at it with the lens of new businesses. So we entered into the health business about 10 years ago, of course, with a view to addressing important issues in the healthcare system, like accessibility and affordability of the healthcare system. So very much motivated with ESG factors in mind 10 years ago. So I have to give our CEO credit for being very foresightful. And then most recently, our decision to get into the ag business has been similarly motivated. We see an opportunity to address an urgent problem, and a problem that is only going to get worse with the passage of time, which is food safety, food security, food availability for many citizens. So ESG has been very important there, and we can't forget the E in ESG. We've also made very important investments in renewable energy, and we've been very focused on reducing our own environmental footprint. That in turn has enabled us to attract capital. We just issued Canada's first sustainability-linked bond, which directly links our achievement of certain environmental targets to the cost of capital, to the cost of the interest payable on the bond. Long way of saying it's sort of ESG has informed our biggest, most important strategic goals and our entry into new businesses, and it has informed the way we do those businesses and the way we conduct business. So it's a very important thing for us. Just one thing before we go, human capital. Greg, I thought, spoke very beautifully about that. We can't forget that. And as we've built our businesses, we also have been focused on ensuring that our people stay engaged. We've focused on building diverse teams at every level from the board down. And we've focused on supporting their desire to contribute to their communities.
Thank you. So one of our audience, as you know, is the Legal Marketing Association, marketers at law firms, many of whom are at law firms or advise law firms. So one of the things law firms are often, or lawyers who, private firm lawyers are often told, is to understand your client's business. So I just want to get into more of the nuts and bolts of how you run your business and your strategic plans and priorities. And if you can speak to a bit about how those are affected by ESG priorities, and in a more examples that you could perhaps provide that would help them understand, legal marketing professionals understand how that unfolds. So I'll turn it to Nick first, if you want to speak to that.
Well, again, I guess we're a little different in the sense that we're not centralized. We don't do anything, from Vancouver office that we dictate for every single division, because we're in all those different industries. So every single different business has their own priorities, their own way of managing through their businesses and their contracts and their different priorities. And in turn, we sort of set the table for the bigger picture priorities, and ESG being one of them. And there's a number of others, but and then what we do is we look to, because we meet with every single division every quarter. So we have 28 meetings every quarter that takes 2 weeks. And in the course of those meetings, we review all the important things. So financials, ESG, safety, a variety of other things. And in the course of that meeting every quarter, we see specifically what our different divisions are doing with respect to those items, where their challenges are, where their needs are, and we apply sort of best practices. So notwithstanding that a division might be in a different business or in a different industry, there's still some good learnings that can be shared amongst the different companies. And so with me getting to attend all those meetings, I can kind of point them in the right direction, or I can point them to others who have already done it. So we don't have divisions reinventing the wheel time and again. And that translates into oftentimes different professionals, including law firms, about who's done it or who's helped us, who's given us some advice or guidance. And so that's kind of the benefit of being one sort of big family, if you will, is best practices as they might be relevant.
Great, thanks. And Greg, I would imagine how ESG fits into your business priorities and strategic plans would look quite different in your context. So can you speak to that, how that sort of looks in your day-to-day work?
So I'm going to actually borrow some words from Andrea, who eloquently, I think, described how things work at Pharmascience. So I would say that ESG is front and center. Again, I can't stress enough. I think it's the fundamentals. It's the foundation of our industry. So it's front and center in everything we do. And I think, I'm going to plagiarize Andrea. It informs us. It drives us. It directs us on how we build our strategies, our objectives, our priorities. But it's, first and foremost, ESG, whether it's affordable medicines, quality, risk management, supply chain management, et cetera, et cetera. And then we fold our strategies, our tactics, our priorities, objectives into those ESG drivers of the business. So a bit, and then to Nick's point, similar to what Nick's in his business, we have a very senior, even though we're not publicly traded, but if you can imagine a sort of the most senior of the board and senior management is overlooking all of our business units that regularly, certainly once a year, but probably on a monthly basis, more intensely on a quarterly and then an annual basis, where we are reviewing those strategies to be sure that they are still in line with ESG principles that guide us. And if they aren't, that they're adjusted quickly and we evolve. I hope have I answered your question. So a bit of a cross between what Nick's experiencing and what's happening at TELUS at Pharmascience.
That's great. And Andrea, can you speak as well to how your strategic plans and business priorities, how ESG fits into that on an operational level?
We're happy to do that, Tim. I've talked a little bit about the bigger picture, which is the way we use problem identification and opportunity identification to inform the businesses that we have gotten into. Once we're in those businesses, I would say ESG and our commitment to social capitalism provide us with a shared set of values and a vocabulary that we can use as an executive leadership team, and then even above at the board level and below throughout the ranks of TELUS to inform the smaller decisions that we have to make. I will routinely be on calls where somebody will say, well, is that really customers first? And we'll challenge a decision, and we use that language to reinforce a set of shared values, but also to help guide our decision making. And then on a more practical level, we the corporate scorecards that inform our executive compensation include ESG metrics. So as an example, employee engagement is on everybody's scorecard. So we're all motivated by our pocketbooks to ensure that we're contributing to good employee engagement. Similarly, we all share environmental targets that are on all of our executive scorecards. So that's, I think, an important driver of behavior too, because what you choose to put onto those high-level scorecards really signals to your team what are your expectations of them as regards ESG.
Thank you. And Gregory, you mentioned this already, but can we turn to the pandemic and the more sort of immediate priorities and how that the pandemic may have shifted ESG priorities? So do you want to speak to that first about how that's unfolded in your space?
Love to. Thank you for the question. So, I think the pandemic, as important as ESG is and continues to be to pharma science and ingrained in our DNA, if you will, I think the pandemic, and significantly is an understatement, heightened the importance of ESG in our business operations, our behavior, the way we do business. And I think to a large degree also acted as a catalyst to be innovative in all of the aspects of ESG. And I was interested. So as Andrea mentioned, TELUS Health, I wanted to sort of link up an interesting, as you mentioned, your virtual health at TELUS. Virtual health was something that was already existing before the pandemic, but you can be sure that the interest, if pharmaceutical companies like ourselves is extremely high. Everything has changed. Doctors no longer see you in person. Clinics, patients are seeing doctors online. The traditional 30 years of doing business a certain way has been sort of turned upside down. So, and I think that's a good thing. It's certainly a good thing. I think, I'm thinking for us also, it's accelerated, it's heightened innovation, whereas we were using AI, specifically just for a specific example, supply chain management, predicting shortages. So patients always have medication. You can imagine with the onset of COVID, not just vaccines, even before vaccines, there were a significant amount of existing medication to treat the symptoms that were undersupplied, that were at risk of not being able to reach patients in Canada that were hospitalized. So all of that, I think the unfortunate thing in a lot of ways, and a lot of sad consequences of the pandemic, but in another way, I think it's pushed us to higher levels and higher thinking that I think will make our ESG programs more robust and sustainable long-term.
Thank you. Nick, can you tell us a bit about how the pandemic has affected the ESG priorities in the various businesses your company's in?
Yeah, I think we probably didn't equate what we did, which was the first priorities were the health and safety of our employees and our guests. So whether they're guests in grocery stores or guests anywhere, that was priority number one. And so I'm not sure that we consciously said this is advancing or detracting or slowing down our ESG efforts. I think it was just more, this is the right thing to do. And so we focused on what was the right thing to do across all lines. So in the grocery stores, we went from a situation where it was ordinary business to people were pantry loading, and it was business was much higher. Our employees had to deal with all sorts of different kinds of retail shoppers, from friendly and not so friendly. On the one hand, so that's on the plus and the busy side, to businesses that were shut down and where employees were laid off because the aquarium was shut down or the Great Wolf Lodge was shut down. But in the course of that, in the Great Wolf Lodge, for example, they stayed in touch with all of their employees. They provided weekly newsletters, ability to get meals at cost, and it was the right thing to do. But the other thing was it kept our employees in touch with the employer. And 18 months later, when they were finally able to reopen, they were able to rehire about 85% of the employee base. And so that was also a huge driver here, is that on both sides of the border, and we've heard about it in all industries, for a lot of reasons, that employees want to work differently, or employees didn't want to work at all, and wanted to have the government money. And so there's a lot of challenges just basically getting through the pandemic from a practical business point of view. So I don't want to say ESG took a back seat to the pandemic, but again, it was less consciously thought of in the context of what we're dealing with, and more what's the right thing to do dealing with this from day to day. And so, I think what we learned more was how to operate our businesses with our people, both in the office and out of the office, but just more efficiently overall, and certainly on a more cost-effective basis. So, maybe it bounces on the outer layers of ESG, but it was just more of, this is survival mode time for many of our businesses. And so what do you do? And how do we get through this? But what's the best learnings that come of it? And what are the learnings that we can use going forward as permanent learnings? And we certainly have a lot of those.
Great. Andrea, I would imagine the different kinds of businesses were affected very differently within TELUS as well. But if you can speak to us about how the pandemic kind of affected the prior ESG, how that was understood at your company.
Sure. Well, as I listened to Nick, I heard a lot of similarities between Pattinson and TELUS. We also started from the perspective that we wanted to keep our employees, our team members, and our customers safe. So that meant that we had to closed our executive offices, we closed our stores, all but a few that were needed to keep customers, to provide customers with access to telecom, which of course is an essential service. A little bit differently, because we're in the healthcare business, we were able to quickly assemble a team of medical experts to guide our response to the pandemic. We took advice from a national team of experts, people with everything from public health to primary care to infectious disease specialty. And we were able to benefit from their professional advice to us about the pandemic and how we ought to respond to it. They advised, we formed an emergency management operating committee that again managed our response to the pandemic enterprise-wide and across all of our different businesses. So we took a very science-based approach to managing our response to the pandemic. So our stores unfortunately had to close, other than a few all over the country that were needed to provide essential services. Our clinics closed. We actually have bricks and mortar clinics, and people stopped traveling, and so we lost revenue from international roaming. So we had a lot of negative impacts to our business. On the other hand, we already were in the virtual healthcare business. We were able to ramp that up and expand our capabilities there very rapidly. And so in the past year, I think that business has grown exponentially to the point that I think it's 500% bigger in terms of revenue than it was prior to the pandemic. So there was a positive business impact for us, as well as a positive ESG impact. We were able to ensure that people got health care without having to take the risk of traveling to their doctor's offices. And we believe that through virtual care, we were able to help people to avoid going into hospitals unless it was, of course, absolutely necessary. Of course, we launched TAG, TELUS Ag, in early 2021. We launched a $100 million social impact fund at the end of the year called the TELUS Pollinator Fund to fund entrepreneurs. You know, and that was very exciting, and will ensure that other similarly minded entrepreneurs are able to continue our vision and extend our vision. So we did that all while delivering good financial results. We were the only national carrier to deliver positive revenue and EBITDA growth in 2020. And I say that because, number one, we're very proud of it, but number two, it supports the thesis that doing well in business can be the same as being a leader in ESG, and that, you know, being thoughtful about ESG and community support and community giving can drive good business results.
Thank you. Now, ESG is an acronym that we all use these days, and obviously it encompasses many things: the environment, social, community relationships, CSR, client engagement, health and safety, and then on the governance side, structure, values, reporting, security. So how do you balance all those different things within your company? Are there some that sort of have, as Gregory mentioned, about being in your DNA, and then ones that are coming up that are newer? And how, as I said, do you balance that within? So I'll start with you, Gregory. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I guess I would say, because it's, you know, coming back, it's ingrained in our DNA, probably because of the industry and the highly regulated industry, that I don't think anything, and a bit like Nick had said, nothing has really fallen short. Like, it's always been, it's continued, whether pandemic, pre-pandemic, it's just continued to grow, more focus, perfecting, improving. I think, you know, the only, so I don't see it so much as I don't think pharma science would say there's a balance. It's probably, you know, spending extra effort on a few areas, and I've heard both Andrea and Nick talk about, you know, human capital, which I think has become even more important. It requires additional attention, but I would say on a balance, it's not like we're taking away from the other ones, which are equally important to our business and to our end customers, patients. It's about, you know, finding extra resources to spend on those two, I would say, in our industry. One of them being our employees, because now everyone, I think we all hear like it's hard to get employees. Employees are moving around, a lot of reflection, where people are changing very radically what they're doing, who they're working for, what they're doing. And I think supply chain management, which I think, I'm not sure, I can't speak for Andrew or Nick, but we certainly had a jolt when a lot of our, you know, we do manufacture and are responsible for about 50% of the products that we sell around the world come from our factories. So we did a great job as everyone protecting our employees, our customers, but then there's the other 50%, which are coming from around the world. And as we all know, a lot of countries did not fare so well during the pandemic as we did in Canada to maintain safety, productivity, et cetera. So again, I would say it's not a question of balance, it's a necessity. And all we're doing now is spending extra resources on those that ESG elements that require those resources, human capital for us, and sustained supply chain.
Thank you. And Nick, can you speak to that a bit about, would you use the word balance, or how do you see all these different priorities within all the E, N, S, and G in that broad idea?
Yeah, I agree with Greg. It's both a moving target, and it's you know, again, trying to do the best thing. I mean, before we call this the stuff ESG, you know, it dealt with safety practices at work. It dealt with employee hiring techniques. It dealt with management controls and disciplines. It dealt with, you know, who's running the place. And so, you know, those things have been around for a long time. Now we have this kind of sexy acronym that encompasses all this stuff. And environmental, you know, everyone's trying to do better on the environment. So, you know, again, it has different priorities for us because, for example, you know, the guys that work for Guinness World Records that sell a book, safety is not a big concern. The guys that work for, you know, the manufacturing plants, safety is part of the religion. So it's really very fact specific. And again, the way we do things is decentralized as we are, it has to be done at that local level. It has to be done at that local management level. And where we influence things, again, is to try to help with things that they may not have thought about, or best practices from another company, or even from competitors. I mean, you can learn some of your best information from your competitors because it's all available most of the time. So again, whatever the balance is today, it's probably going to be different tomorrow or next month or next year.
Thank you. And when we talked about this before the panel discussion, Andrea, you mentioned environmental issues such as recent weather events and the wildfires and hurricanes and all the climate change the discussions that have been in and how it's affected business. So can you speak to that, and then also how you're balancing that with all the other elements within ESG?
Sure. I will, but before I do, I just want to pick up on something amazing that Nick said, if you'll indulge me. I think Nick put his finger on it, which is, you know, you can't make universal statements about ESG. You know, the components of an ESG program have to be different for every company and every industry, and they have to take into account the industry in which you operate. You know, otherwise it's not sincere. And I don't think going to be effective. So Nick, I thought that was an amazing point, and I think that you know, on the and that kind of brings me to the B word that we've been struggling with, which is balance. And so, you know, as we seek to balance ESG objectives, I think you've got to think a little bit about what makes sense for the business, what are its capabilities, what are its natural opportunities, and what are its risks. And then you need to think about materiality, et cetera. And so moving on to environment, I would say that one needs to assess environment in exactly the same way. You know, one needs to start by looking at the business and thinking about where the business consumes energy, whether there is an opportunity to reduce that energy consumption. And we've done that in a very methodical way. We as a telecom carrier are probably not thought of as being a high emitter. And it is true, we're not in the oil sands business, for example. However, we do have a significant environmental footprint. We have fleets of vehicles. We have our operations require energy to operate. We've built buildings in several cities, and we've done that in a way that makes us comfortable and that makes us feel as though it is aligned with our values. So, for example, the buildings that we've built have been LEED Platinum. We just opened one in Calgary that is LEED Platinum. We have one in Vancouver, which was LEED Platinum. I work out of Toronto, and our building there is, I think, LEED Platinum, maybe LEED Gold, but I think Platinum. So, you know, we at every opportunity think about how big is our environmental footprint and how can we reduce it in a way that is going to support our business, not detract from our business outcomes. So back to the horrible balance word. Again, you know, I think there is a tendency to assume that spending on ESG is spending that you lose from other areas. In fact, we see it differently. We think that spending on ESG is synergistic with delivering returns to our shareholders. You know, so in other words, we're not spending money on the environment or on reducing our footprint in a way that will cost our shareholders return on their investment. You know, quite the contrary, we are absolutely committed to the view that it will improve their investment, it will improve our risk profile going forward and make us more sustainable as a long-term investment because we are mitigating environmental risks.
Thank you. And my last question, I'm going to kind of put two things together that we discussed in advance that we wanted to cover. And because our audience is marketing professionals in the legal space, obviously a lot of the law firms, their connection to their clients are through the GC's office. So can you talk a bit about how your legal department fits its role within the company, how that works in terms of ESG, and then how you see the law firms as helping you do your job internally within the company to support the ESG priorities. So I'll start with Gregory.
I'm mindful of time, so and Andrea, Nick, if I start to talk too much, you'll just cut me off. So I'm watching time. So I would say overall, legal has direct responsibility and also indirect responsibility. Direct meaning we are responsible for business compliance, risk and crisis management. We are, from a department perspective, all of our different divisions across the organization responsible for human capital management. I mean, we're whether it's diversity, training, et cetera, there's some mixed organization, broad directives, but the insurance that it will actually be successful and achieve is with the division. And then indirect, where we are supportive. Other groups within the organization have the responsibility and we support those groups with ideas, with legal support, business support, acumen, et cetera, et cetera. So the last part of your question, I'm going to give an example, and I struggled with this because I certainly don't want to be negative. I'm not meaning to be critical, but I do want to sort of give one example which was really helpful. So we have a firm that we do business with, and this is one of many firms around the globe. Very prominent experience, like incredible. We have a very strong external counsel network. And this one particular firm, before the pandemic or during the pandemic, had actually reached out. And they're not in pharma. So they have like general idea, but they're not in pharmaceuticals, highly regulated. I mean, it's something you learn over a couple of decades. They understood our industry enough to understand our industry. They understood enough about pharma science, our business, who we were. And they zoned in on two particular issues that they knew that we were, and honestly, they were right on, that we were facing because of the pandemic. And they were visionary in the sense, and I want to be careful because, in the pandemic, they were visionary to say, we're almost predicting that this is where we're going to land with this pandemic, how the governments, et cetera, companies, et cetera, where they're going. And if you want to be ahead of the curve, you should be considering A, B, C, D, E. And so not only did they anticipate, they were visionaries, but they came, which I just love. And I think this is so cliche and everyone's going to say, oh, of course, that's what you all want. They came with a business ready, not legal ready. There was no theory, there was no laws, there was no big thesis, there was no legal opinions. Business ready solutions, turnkey, easy for the business to understand and quickly embrace and understand the value, implement, and almost immediately see benefit. So, firstly, the law firm becomes a hero because, I'm and my team of 16 are going, oh my gosh, we will listen to you anytime you call. And then secondly, the business are going, legal is really truly a business partner. They're not just a bunch of lawyers looking at laws. They're there, they can help us. So I would say, if I was asking or giving counsel to anyone on the line from LMA members, and we've heard this from Andrea, made the comment, Nick, understand our industry, understand our business, specifically us, because it's unique. And then come to us with solutions that we can pretty much flip, done, and the business is going, wow, thank you, we've made progress. Sorry, I took more time, Nick and Andrea. I finished, off to you.
That's great. And I want to give Nick and Andrea a chance. So you can answer both or one question. It's sort of how your legal department fits in within the company with these priorities, or how you see legal services providers help you achieve those goals.
Yeah, I think I totally pile on to everything Greg said. The way we do things is a little differently in terms of we manage stuff, but I've talked about that. But in terms of a more important point is Greg's second point, and that is, for us, we're all busy, but we all have our stresses and strains, but none of us are in the GC role experts about much. probably. Oh, maybe I'll just say that about myself. So we can use all the help we can get. And so the only other little refinement that I'd put on Greg's answer, which I thought was very good, is if you have something to offer and you've invested the time researching the company, our company, one of the companies, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, if you've thought of something, spent enough time, don't worry that it's gold plated. Pick up the phone, give us a call and say, look, have you thought about this? It's that proactive approach that I would say is lacking more often than not. So be proactive and not reactive.
That's great. And Andrea, I want to give you a chance to give this.
I'll do it quickly.
Advice.
Like they said, but I agree with everything both Nick and Greg said. I just say also keep in mind that as law firms you have clout. You control a lot of spending. You can support the brands that align with your values, and you cannot support the brands that you think are doing a bad job at this stuff. So, you know, both as individuals within law firms and as law firms, you have a lot of spending power. That's number one. Number two is remember that we're looking at you and we're expecting you to field teams that look like us. We want to see diversity. We want to see a commitment to community. And so make sure that that your brand aligns with our brand, because they are very sincerely held values on our part. And I think if you want to do business with us, you need to understand our values. I can't tell you what a turnoff it is for me when I'm introduced to a new team of people that are offering to support us, and I see a sea of like faces. You know, I'll leave it at that. But what I want to see when I want to see legal excellence, of course, but that's table stakes. I want to see diversity in the fields that you team in the teams that you field and that you offer to support us. Help us to do our community work. Help us to build lawyers in underrepresented communities. I am personally interested in widening the pipeline of people who come to us from underrepresented communities. I don't know why they don't come to us, but I'm very interested in partners that will help us to overcome whatever challenges people are facing in getting into the pipeline. And be supportive of our community fundraising. Join us if you want to do an event, do it with us. So those are some tips. I'll leave it at that because I do know we're time challenged.
That's great. So I think, as you say, we're coming up to our time. Valérie, I don't know if there's any questions or if we have time to squeeze one in, or whether you want to wrap it up.
Actually, Tim, there's no question on the Q&A tool that have not been answered yet. So I'm assuming your panelists have been very generous of in the content they share with us today.
Yes, and selfishly, I'll say if there are questions that you think of later, feel free to send them to me, and then we'll write a story about it, and we'll interview one of our great panelists today for something on the record, as unlike today. So yeah,
I like that. Tim, Andrea, Nick, and Greg, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for your inspiring comments. I also would like to thank again our sponsor, K-Media. For LMA folks on the line, please look forward for our upcoming events, including our Canada Next Big Thing next week. And I want to thank you everyone for attending today, and I hope you will have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.